Sponsored by Brilliant. It's time to break up Amazon, Google, and Facebook. That's how U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren began her explosive big tech takedown proposal on Medium on March 8. 25 years ago, Facebook, Google, and Amazon didn't exist. Now they are among the most valuable and well-known companies in the world. It's a great story, but also one that highlights why the government must break up monopolies and promote competitive markets. Needless to say, the proposal got a lot of attention, especially in the tech press. Since then, Warren, who has a long history of consumer advocacy, has expanded and elaborated on who she's targeting and what she means, especially when it comes to Apple and the App Store. And that includes an interview that went live just last night with my guest today, Editor-in-Chief of The Verge, Nilay Patel. I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. Nilay Patel, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I love Vector.
So I guess for anyone who may not be familiar with it already, Warren's plan sounds pretty simple. Like you take tech companies that make over $25 billion a year, that own their own platforms, and that do business on those platforms, and you split them up. And she named Facebook, Google, and Amazon right off the top, though obviously like Apple and others are going to play into that. Is that the crux of it, or is there something deeper to it?
It is definitely the crux of it. Her plan has 4 parts. So she wouldn't split them up in that case. She would actually just say you're prohibited from doing business on your own platform.
Okay.
And the assumption is that Amazon Basics is too good of a business, so they would just like do it themselves. Which is kind of one of the points that she made to me when I interviewed her was we can regulate these companies. I can hire a bunch of lawyers, a bunch of agencies, around the government, and we can crawl through Amazon and figure out where the harm's are and break them apart. Or I can just put a bunch of rules in place and they will figure it out. And that is a better capitalist solution, right? And Warren, and I think this is very interesting about Senator Warren in particular in this race, in the Democratic primary, is she says she is a capitalist very explicitly. And I think that is to separate her from the Bernie Sanders, the Democratic socialist. She is a capitalist. She thinks the market should do the job. And so her approach to this is to just take a hammer to the big companies and say, we'll have more companies and more competition, and that is the right outcome. So yes, the sort of top line of her plan is over $25 billion a year in revenue. You own a marketplace. You can't put your own products in the marketplace. I don't know if that's totally workable, but it solves this problem of, does the government have to have an army of lawyers sitting over Jeff Bezos' shoulder, sitting over Tim Cook's shoulder? Or can we just give smart people a bunch of rules they have to follow and they'll figure it out?
So reading through the material, though, it strikes me, like you said, that there's a couple different things here. Like she mentions explicitly breaking up Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. But then she spoke, like you said, about just not having Apple or having Amazon playing on its own platform. Are those part of the same policy, or are those sort of different solutions to different problems?
Right, and so that's what I mean. They're different, and that's what I mean. There's 4 parts to the plan. So first is the problem of big platform companies operating in their own markets. And so here's a rule for that. So if you don't make, so there's 3 parts of that rule. So there's $0 to $90 million a year in revenue, and that's just a free for all. You can do whatever you want. If you make $89.9 million,
so safe.
You're safe. Everyone's joking. Like, Vox Media owns The Verge and Eater and Vox.com. Like, we wouldn't have to break it up because honestly, we don't make that much money. I wish we did. It'd be great.
Yes.
These are champagne problems, right? These are you're on your yacht with a champagne glass, being like, how will we solve this problem? So there's that first tranche, which is 0 to 90. Between 90 million and 25 billion, which is an absolutely huge range, you would have what she's referring to as an obligation of neutrality, where you run a marketplace, you can put your own products into it, but other companies who operate in your marketplace could demand that you're operating in some fair and neutral way. And they could sue you, and the government could sue you, maybe a consumer could sue you. So you have this huge obligation. And then above 25 billion, your store is just too valuable, your platform is too valuable, and we don't want you to monkey around in it. So that's the first 3 parts of the plan. And then the 4th part, which is what you're getting at, is we're also going to go back and review a bunch of mergers that were probably anti-competitive, and we'll find ways to break them up. So then there's this like 4th thing, and that's what Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, all that stuff. That would fall into that. And I think that's a pretty big distinction, right? Like the way she wants to have Amazon break itself up is meaningfully different than the way she wants to break up Facebook. But the core of it is, hey, these companies are huge. They are a little less accountable to you and me, the consumer, than they should be. Like our individual market decisions don't appear to be having that much of an effect in how they work in terms of privacy and all these things. There aren't great other choices out there. So let's just break these companies up, and maybe a split off Instagram will compete on privacy because they know that's how they can capture users from Facebook, right? And that's very much a market-oriented way of thinking about it.
So splitting Amazon away from Amazon Basics instead of from AWS.
Yeah, I mean, is AWS a platform? This is, to me, I don't think this idea is perfect by any means. I just happened to speak with her at South by Southwest, so I have more details. But is AWS a platform, right? It sort of freely accepts customers. You can just sign up for an AWS account and use it. Is that a marketplace? Like, is that a platform? Yes and no. Right. And it certainly has good competition. Like Azure exists. You know, it's not that there's nowhere to go. Google Cloud, which is not great, exists. It's not that there's nowhere to go. But I do think for Amazon in particular as a store, for Google search in particular, and in many cases on platforms like iOS and Android, there are very real sort of consumer harms that come from a lack of competition and from these companies playing in their own markets.
Yeah, you mentioned Jeff Bezos managing profits down to 24.9 billion to avoid this, but you can also see like Apple put a bunch of apps on the App Store, and some of them were just so that you could delete them and then go get them back. And it could easily see Apple just rebundling all those apps into iOS, or Google just reversing what they did with Play Store and bundling a bunch of apps back into Android. So it'll be interesting to see, this stuff doesn't exist now, but interesting to see how the responses to these things are.
Yeah, so you can see sort of consumer. I know Vector, a lot of Mac fans watch Vector, so you can see it where a lot of there are consumer harms the way Apple manages its platforms. Right. Mm-hmm. My favorite one is Mail. Like I would love to just set a default Mail client that isn't Apple Mail on my iPhone, and yet Apple Mail is a part of my life whether I want it to be or not. Right, it's just in Apple says
any mail link you hit will send you straight to Apple Mail.
Sure. Is that like the world's worst consumer harm? It is not. Has that meaningfully depressed the market for mail clients? Probably not. Right. There's like a lot of mail clients in the market, but in other places, that control of the platform is a little damaging. So like Spotify can't just sign up a customer on the iPhone. They have to pay Apple a tax. Yeah. So they don't. Netflix can't sign up a customer on the iPhone. They have to pay a tax. Developers are routinely unhappy about paying the 30% cut to Apple. And if you look at other markets where there are app stores and those app stores are in competition, you see those prices falling. So Steam reduces the rate that developers have to pay. Epic,
Microsoft recently.
Microsoft has reduced the rate that developers have to pay. Fortnite, right? Like Epic just doesn't want to participate in Google's App Store, so they're having people sideload Fortnite. They're cutting deals with Samsung. So in places where the market can actually speak, the market does what it does, which is it lowers prices. In Apple's case, there is no alternative market for app stores. So some developers feel pinched. Some consumer options that you have might feel pinched. That is not the same harm as they put their stuff in the store. And I think this is where Warren's plan kind of falls down. Like Apple made clips. Did it leverage the vast power of the App Store to make clips? It did. It absolutely did not. Well, Apple's about to make a TV service. They're going to launch that presumably on the 25th here. Yeah. Are they going to leverage their vast power over the screen of the iPhone and the screen of the iPad and the screen of the Apple TV to promote their own content? Well, sure they are. Is that the worst thing in the world? I actually don't know, right?
And it's super interesting because when you look at like Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft, I mean, Nintendo makes Mario and Microsoft makes Halo. I mean, they all have first-party games on the platform that they control.
Yeah, so that's like, to me, that's the craziest outcome possible, right? Is you passed, Warren, it gets elected president, she passes this rule. Microsoft makes more than $25 billion a year in revenue, and they can't make first-party games for the Xbox. Like that.
So they
that
have to
is-
spin off Bungie again, and then we get Halo on,
and you get
on
Halo
Nintendo.
on iOS, right? Maybe that's the right outcome for everyone. Who knows? I think that might lead to some extremely weird things happening. But I think, look, she's running for president. I don't think the goal of this is to actually implement it as policy. I think the goal of it is to make you and me do what we're doing right now.
Yes.
Which is seriously talk about whether or not these companies are too big, the ways they express their power, whether that's good for the market, whether that's good for consumers, and to talk about breaking them up. And she's absolutely accomplished that goal, right?
Yeah,
and every other Democratic candidate in this primary, Donald Trump, everybody is going to have to answer the question. Elizabeth Warren has proposed breaking up Facebook. Do you support that? And if you're a candidate, that's what you want. It's like the most you can ask for.
I mean, I'm sure your Slack room is similar, but ours immediately after that, it's like, well, is Walmart a platform? Do they have their Walmart house brands? What about Target? What about Costco? Like, at what point is everything a platform?
Yeah, and I think that is the murkiness of this. It's not well defined. So is an individual Walmart physical retail store a platform? Does it have an obligation of neutrality? Can they sell?
But it does have data beyond what other stores have. It can do shelf positioning for its brands over what other brands can enjoy in their stores.
Sure. And would Procter & Gamble love a rule that says Walmart has to be fair and neutral to them? I'm sure they would.
Yeah.
Would that create more opportunities for some other big consumer packaged goods company to compete with Procter & Gamble? I'm sure it would. Is that the right outcome? It is not. I think the other thing that's really interesting about this whole Warren plan, she's got ads out everywhere that say, let's break up Facebook, Google, and Amazon.
I mean, it's a headline maker, right?
It's a headline maker. And then I sat down to interview her, and I said, well, there's one. And before I even finished the question, she said, Apple, they're in, right? But it's not in her ads. And I think it's a winner right now to go out and say we should break up Amazon. It's a winner to say we should break up Google. It's a winner to say we should break up Facebook. It's a winner on the left and the right. Like, a lot of antitrust action actually comes from the right because, again, it's a very market-oriented position. So Lindsey Graham, who is not, when you think of the Democratic primary, you were not thinking about Lindsey Graham. But Lindsey Graham, who's a very conservative senator, has said we need to ramp up antitrust enforcement because it's a market-oriented solution to just
you have AT&T and Time Warner getting ready to merge, and I remember you just broke them up a couple decades ago.
Exactly. Right. What administration is trying to break up AT&T? It's the Trump administration is trying to break up AT&T and Time Warner. So I think she's managed to attract attention from both the left and the right with this plan. It reaches the right outcome, but she is not putting Apple in those ads, even though you can send a message to her campaign staff and they will happily confirm to you Apple will be included. But I don't think it's a winner message. It's a much more subtle kind of bigness problem that Apple has than Amazon is forcing companies out of its store, then Facebook is sort of generically evil, then conservatives are pissed at Google because they think they're being downranked, right? The Apple antitrust monopoly problem is very much they exert this control over developers on their store, and developers aren't happy, and you can see, particularly like Spotify and Netflix, you can see this very clear outcome. And I don't think that is as controversial probably for listeners of this, for viewers of this, that's just out there. Like, people have been talking about it for a long time, right? But it's not like I don't think it's, you can't put let's break up Apple and then immediately pivot to, because of the App Store policies are like frustrating. Like, so it's just
not as clean a message.
It's not at all as clean a message.
No. So internationally, it's hard for me to see China or Korea doing something like this. Like China saying we need to break up Baidu or Weibo or Huawei or Samsung. Korea saying we can break up Samsung. Do you think this would affect competitiveness internationally, either for the better or for the worse?
I don't know. I mean, those political systems are so different. Those markets are so different. They are geared towards business. The big Chinese companies and the Chinese government are just intertwined in many, many ways. Samsung is like, there's 4 companies in Korea. They're all intertwined with the government. And they're massive. They make, Samsung makes like nuclear reactors, right?
Yeah.
Like,
toilet seats, nuclear reactors, everything in between.
We just don't have that. I think like America in its DNA does not want that relationship between governments and corporations. I think the entire moment that we're having now is, hey, that relationship got too tightly wound. Yeah. Right. And like you just feel it. It's like on both sides of the political spectrum, there's a sense of like populist rage because the corporations and governments are too tightly wound. Would that affect our international competitiveness? Like, no. I think Apple and Google and Facebook and Amazon are still extraordinarily well-managed companies that are going to be big, no matter if Amazon is making literally the MacBook stand my Mac is on right now or not, right? So I think it's a very different kind of question, and it's a question that demands, like, is there more growth in America or not?
Yeah.
Right. And if you have more companies being more competitive, I think you will actually unlock more growth inside of the country. Can we prove that out? It's very hard to prove it out, but
it's hard to experiment.
It is hard to run an A/B test on that.
All right, perfect. So last question, and you already addressed this, but just to sort of put a button on it, does this come off to you as more like an actual policy or one of those big vision conversation starter things? I mean, breaking up Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, you just get tons and tons of headlines, but that's the easy part. Like if you were put in charge of actually doing it, there's so many details, there's so many implementations that you'd have to figure out. Do you have any sense of where this might go from here? Is it destined to be just a big conversation topic for a year, or do you think there'll be any actual movement on it?
So it has been a big conversation topic for longer than a year. So I'm a huge nerd, policy nerd. I have, on the Vergecast, our podcast, we have been talking to antitrust experts for about a year about everything's getting too big. So yeah, it's a big idea, and the implementation is hard. But ultimately, I think you and I, as consumers, like we feel it. We feel the fact that our choices are being limited every day. That it might be great if I love Apple, but that means my like choice of smart home products is limited to just HomeKit. And then I have to like go to the web to like use. You can just feel it. It's you have to buy into like one set of lock-in versus another set of lock-in, and there's not a lot of great horizontal service competition and all the stuff that you feel.
Yes.
And that is now translating itself into, hey, are these companies too big? Like, is there enough actual market competition to make the lives of American consumers better, to give people more choices? I think that is a great conversation. As a guy who like just loves tech products, like, do I want there to be more tech products? Yeah, I absolutely do. Do I think that Apple and Google competing on iOS and Android has made both platforms like really, really good? I absolutely do. So I think we can all feel it. How you get at it, whether it's an Elizabeth Warren style bright line rule where Amazon just has to like break itself up, or it's some other rule about the obligations a platform vendor has to the people who play on. Like, there are many, many ways to come at it. I think to start a conversation at the national level when you're, one of the name candidates in the race, you might as well just go with break up Amazon and then see what happens next, right? Like, you might as well just push the pendulum as far as you can with a somewhat unworkable idea. And then now everyone's talking about, well, if we were to break up Amazon, we do it like this. And at the end of the day, everyone's talking about breaking up Amazon. And I think that is savvy. Like, I'll just give her credit for that. I think the rule itself, just the more I thought about it after talking to her, it doesn't actually address the harms I see.
Yeah.
But it addresses it. It's cleaner. I buy her argument that it is cleaner to just break them up than it is to like install some lawyers at Tim Cook's house, which is basically, that's fundamentally what they did with Microsoft, right? They did a consent decree. They watched every move the company made. And it had good outcomes and bad outcomes. But I buy her argument that it is cleaner to just break them up and walk away than it is to sort of monitor their behavior.
Judge Judy Koh gets to run every company in America.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, man. This was great.
Thank you, Renee. I really appreciate it.
Now, knee-jerk reactions to this stuff are easy. Of course they shouldn't break up Apple or Nintendo or insert the name of my favorite company here, but they absolutely positively should break up Facebook or Amazon or whatever company I don't like as much. And you start to see that these aren't partisan or even political questions, though their implementations will necessarily become just that. In fact, they're very practical questions. They're even very human questions. But the internet, like people, isn't good with multiple truths or multiple falsehoods. But that's why we have Brilliant. Can a statement be true if all of its parts are false? Surprisingly, or maybe not, the answer is yes. Each problem comes with illustrations, animations, or interactive visualizations, and all the context you need to solve the problem yourself. If you like the problem and want to learn more, there's a related course that explores the same concept in greater detail. So if you want to actively learn new, fascinating concepts each day and get 20% off the annual subscription to view all problems in the archive, just be one of the first 200 to head on over to brilliant.org/vector and finish your day a little smarter every day. Thanks, Brilliant, and thanks to all of you for supporting the show. Now, here's where I turn it all over to you. Should Facebook be broken up? Should Google or Amazon? What about Apple or Microsoft? Walmart or Costco? AT&T or Comcast? And I want you to be honest here, does the answer depend more on how much you like the company than the actual power they have in the market and over our lives? Hit like, hit subscribe, it really helps out the channel, and then hit up the comments and let me know. And thank you so much for watching.